Good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Wednesday, September 1st, 2021. And our top stories today, America's climate change prone areas are swelling in population, and the impact of the lifting of the eviction moratorium on landlords. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Deidre Woolard. She's the editor of MillionAcres.com. Deidre, great to have you back. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Yeah, and happy almost Labor Day to you and your family. But let's talk about something that I really, to me, was unnoticed, and I bet unnoticed by many folks here, and that is where there's areas of great climate change, we're seeing populations, seeing this rolling movement of people moving to these areas. What do you have to say about all that? That's kind of concerning, I would think.
It is concerning. So this is a study that came out from Redfin and Climate Check, which is a service that assesses climate change in your individual area. And so you're looking at things like flood maps, wildfire, drought, things like that, things that are all in the news right now. And the interesting thing is the places that people are moving are absolutely those places that are at risk for these things. Phoenix was one of the top cities for people to move to last year. And that city is going to face some drought concerns and certainly faces serious heat concerns.
So let's talk about, I think everyone is, we've had you on numerous times throughout the tenure of BRN, and you've talked about this movement afoot that's been happening because of the pandemic, people relocating. But what's the rationale? Do people are moving because why? Is it less expensive in these areas? Are home prices more affordable? What's the rationale for moving into areas that you could suffer potentially?
Well, this has really been a decade-long transition toward Sunbelt areas. We saw this starting to happen really like 2010. And so some of it is absolutely lower prices. Some of it is great weather. I mean, if you're going to Florida, people go to Florida, weather, beaches, there's a lot to love about these areas. Some of them just are going to be at increased risk.
Yeah. And so what should viewers know if you were thinking about moving? First of all, how do you get a hold of this list? So how do you do research? If I'm buying a property, whether I'm an investor, Deidre, or a first-time home buyer or just a home buyer looking for a new property, how do I figure out if where I'm going to move is going to be part of this, going to be impacted by climate change?
Well, one thing is that service that I mentioned that Redfin did the research with, which is climatecheck.com. That is sort of like, it's almost like a Zillow's estimate for your climate risk. But there are other things that you can do. You want to look at flood maps. You want to look at what has happened in the area previously. You want to know about flood risk, storms. You just sort of want to research the area. I mean, there are parts of Florida where, people are there. It's hard to get a 30-year mortgage because there is a concern that the place could be, in trouble within 30 years. So there are certain areas that are probably not investable right now. But we've also got cities doing amazing things to try to mitigate some of these things. We've got what's happening in New York where they're building all of those reef beds with the oysters underwater to try to change the way the flow of the ocean comes in. I mean, one of the things that's interesting is I never count out human ingenuity when it comes to things like this. And I think there are amazing things happening. I just think there are some areas to be careful about.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at what just happened in New Orleans as we're chatting today. I mean, they're just having the remnants of that storm, a lot of impact, I think billions and billions of dollars of damage. Now, the levees held, I think, which is amazing because during Katrina, they did not, and there was a lot of flooding. What does this mean in terms of maybe future property values? I would think that if there is risk like this, property values will go down longer term because the risk will only go up if we don't do anything to mitigate that risk. But also things like insurance, flood insurance, home insurance, other things that you need, car insurance, those things probably go up because the more likelihood that an insurance company would have to pay out some amount of money during a period of time.
One would think so, but so far it hasn't happened. I mean, look at areas like the Hamptons, for example. Prices have gone up there. You've got areas in Malibu. You've got places where residents, that are wealthy are actually bringing in sand by the truckloads to build up beaches. So it's an interesting thing, because if you have a place that is valuable, home prices are up, people want to do whatever they can to stay there and protect the value of their homes. I mean, that's why you have in the West right now, you've got these two terrible fires going on in Northern California. You've got the Caldor fire and the Dixie fire right around Lake Tahoe. I mean, that area has never really seen a lot of fire. So you wonder, if things get burned down, will they be built up again, or will people move on? Most of the time, people are building exactly where the fire was.
Yeah, I guess my question, just a general question, and I'm not a real estate owner. I've been renting, but what makes an area attractive? I mean, I would imagine with Lake Tahoe, it's beautiful scenery. Some of the areas you're describing, the Hamptons, you're right there on the ocean. So, I guess that your location trumps everything.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I grew up on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and that's an area that could absolutely be at risk. I mean, that is a very, very small area, and water on both sides, but it's beautiful. People want to live by the ocean. People are willing to accept a certain amount of risk, I think, to live in beautiful places. I mean, that's one of the reasons with the wildfires in California, you've got people moving closer and closer to the wooded areas, and that unfortunately puts their homes at risk.
Yeah, maybe I've just watched too many sci-fi movies, but I seem to recall the movie Deep Impact. Do you remember that movie, Deidre?
I do.
Morgan Freeman, and there was an asteroid, and it hit it was one of the two asteroid movies for the year, and it hit
that and Armageddon.
Yep, Armageddon, right? And there was like, hey, everyone tried to move to the middle of the country. Well, Deidre, I would need to go to a quick commercial break. That was a horrible segue, but who knows? We're going to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we'll talk about the lifting of the eviction moratorium and what it means for landlords. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM.
You need a financial plan that fits the way you want to live in retirement. A plan that can help grow and protect your money, now or in the future. With an annuity in your plan to help cover essential expenses, you'll have the freedom to live the retirement you want. This is what an annuity can do. Find the right financial professional to show you how. Learn more at protectedincome.org.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit Repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking to Deidre Woolard of MillionAcres.com. Deidre, thanks as always for staying with us this morning.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this next topic with you.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I had to think of a good movie to bring in towards the end of the segment, like I did after that first segment. But let's talk about this lifting of the eviction moratorium. And the Supreme Court weighed in here, and so they eliminated the moratorium that was extended by the Center for Disease Control. And I think a lot of people have talked at length about the impact to all these renters and the fact that eviction proceedings will now move forward. How fast it is, we don't know. How fast the courts will move. But what's often lost in the conversation is the impact to landlords. And I know you wanted to weigh in here to give that perspective too.
Yeah, this is something I've been following ever since we started seeing the eviction moratoriums. And the interesting thing is we're not really sure if we're going to get another federal eviction moratorium, because what the Supreme Court did is they essentially ruled that the CDC kind of doesn't have the right to do that without Congress voting, and Congress had not voted to extend. And so that was part of that. You've still got all of these local and state eviction moratoriums in a various state of flux. And it's been hard on landlords throughout the pandemic. And it's really disproportionately affecting smaller landlords, the mom and pops with less than 4 units for rent. Those are the ones that are feeling it the most dramatically. And it's been interesting because there's a lot of aid out there for tenants, but it's been really hard for them to get it. And there's not really been a lot of help for landlords who are then trying to help their tenants and wading through all of these different forms trying to get the aid. So a lot of that aid kind of hasn't gone to where it needs to.
I mean, it's estimated, I think I'm looking here at a stat from the U.S. Census Bureau, 11.4 million renters may be behind on their rent. I mean, that's not a small amount, Deidre. And when you think about landlords, let's just break down some of the things that they have to focus on. And again, we're not pitting anyone against each other. I mean, these are just the facts as they are, that when you own a property, you got to pay property tax. You got to have upkeep, maintenance. You've got to do all those things regardless of whether or not you've got money coming in. And by the way, you assume those risks as a landlord too, so you're aware of some of that. But some of these risks, some of that risk now, really to the extreme because of the pandemic.
Well, and also you had some of these landlords that maybe were in a forbearance program for their mortgage. So they got a little bit of a break there, but those programs expire. They're going to need to pay their mortgages, property tax, utilities and maintenance, all of those things you mentioned. All of that is impacting the health of the households in general. And so it's really a lot of strain. There was a report that came out yesterday from Bloomberg featuring Goldman Sachs estimating that as many as 750,000 households could be evicted. That is a massive amount. And that's a lot of stress on the court system. And there's just so much confusion that really has been going on ever since the pandemic began about where to get help, what eviction moratoriums are in place, what programs there are to support people. It's been a little bit confusing.
Deidre, when you look at the infrastructure plan, not to bring it back to politics, but I want to talk about this. Is there anything that you're aware of in this $3.5 trillion? That seems to be ringing true. Anything in there that would help either renters and also landlords here? Because I kind of see this in the same way I see student loans, that we had a kind of a forbearance or not a forbearance, but a putting off of payment of student loans. Now they're kind of ramping that back up, but it's not going to be immediate. And so you're not going to have to pay everything you owe right away, right? They're extending that. Could we see something similar as part of this infrastructure bill or a future bill that allows people to repay their rent, give some money to landlords, and try to get back into the positive?
There is absolutely some housing information inside the infrastructure bill. There's also talk of a middle income housing tax credit, which could incentivize people to build middle income housing. Because part of the problem is there is just a lack of affordable housing. And so that's another problem too, is what happens when these people get evicted? Is there anywhere else they can go? Lists for low income housing, Section 8 housing, those waiting lists are just so long. So there's this massive need for more affordable housing. The infrastructure bill does address that to some extent, and there are some other bills sort of currently in Congress that may also allocate more resources for that.
Yeah, I just think that this needs attention. There's so many things that need attention. I mean, there's obviously foreign policy, foreign engagements, and things like that. But then there's these economic things that, Deidre, we're going to be feeling the effects of this pandemic. First of all, the new normal is what we have today, in my opinion. You don't have to answer that, but I think that today, somewhere, this is the new normal. So we have to figure out how to operate in this new normal, which means paying rent, finding properties, building homes, just the basic needs. And I think about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We've got to be able to satisfy that, or the government has to be able to satisfy that in order to protect people here.
Well, and one of the things that really has been talked about a lot is it has to be a public-private partnership, because there's a lot of private capital right now that is invested in housing, but there aren't quite enough incentives. So really, to solve this problem, it has to be public and private. There have to be things that incentivize people to build the right level of affordable housing in the areas where it's needed most. And so that's really how we get closer to solving this. Yeah.
I think you're right. I think this is another thing we're going to have to keep watching on. Deidre Woolard is, I didn't have a really good segue in terms of movie. I don't think about Annie and the song Easy Street in the movie Annie. But that probably doesn't really apply here. Deidre Woolard, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for joining us and being a great sport, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, somebody you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. We're back again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.